sweeter?
No one.
What's up, Gator Nation? Welcome into the latest Gators Online show. Zach Albaverdi and Nick Del Torre coming to you, one from the Sunshine State, the other one from Omaha, Nebraska, as Nick is out there covering the Gators as they have advanced to the College World Series final. Just an incredible three-game stretch that they've had in Omaha. Everyone down to the wire. Nick's not been able to get any stories ready by that ninth inning. He's been writing up until the finish. So we're going to talk baseball on today's show. Obviously, preview the Gators' final in the College World Series. At this time of us recording this show, we do not know who that opponent is going to be, but we'll get into that. We will also talk Todd Golden. I had a one-on-one interview with him last week. I'll give you guys my takeaways from that, and also what Todd had to say on Thursday as he met with the media for the first time discussing his 2023-2024 team. And we already had a recruiting show on our Gators Online YouTube channel this week with Keith and Corey. Encourage you guys to check that out, but we'll touch on Friday Night Lights this coming week and kind of put a bow on what has been a really impressive recruiting run. Nick, how are you doing, my friend? Are you on Nebraska time now? You've been out there long enough.
Yeah, my brain doesn't calculate like Central Time well enough, especially because I'm telling game times to people who are most of our subscribers in Eastern Time, and it's only an hour difference. I think if it was Mountain Time, 2 hours would be enough of a separation, but it's 4 o'clock here. The matchup I've been hopefully waiting for, we haven't gotten confirmation about it, but Rhett Loader, first team All-American versus Paul Skeens, first team All-American. Possibility to see them throw against each other tonight in a win or go home game. So you will catch me at the stadium. It's been really cool to see how many Florida fans have been in my mentions or on the message board saying that like flights have been booked, tickets have been purchased. Because right now there's just a lot of LSU fans out here in Omaha. A place I've been now long enough where I think I might have residency.
Yeah, that's when you cover Florida baseball, that's part of the gig. And the Gators have made the most out of their trip this year, undefeated so far in Omaha. They kick things off with the 6-5 win over Virginia. Then they get the 5-4 win over Oral Roberts, and then the 3-2 victory over TCU. Each one won by one inning, and really impressive the way that the Gators have been able to pull out those close games and also set themselves up now for a final where they're going to be able to roll out their top two pitchers to try and get it done on Saturday and Sunday. Nick, there's a lot of angles that we can take here, man, but just what has been your overall impression of this team's 3-0 start? You don't see that very often, and what they've been able to do to put themselves in this position.
Just the second time in program history, Florida started 3-0 in Omaha. The other time was that really talented 2011 team came up short against South Carolina. South Carolina had a team that won its second consecutive national championship that year. But going 3-0, the importance of that, I can point back to 2017. Obviously, that season worked out well for Florida. The Gators had a 3-man rotation similar to what they have now with Alex Faedo, Brady Singer, and Jackson Coher. You felt good about any 3-game series because of that starting pitching. This year, and coming into the year, I said, listen, with Brandon Sproat, Hurston Waldrop, and Jack Caglione, Florida feels good about winning any 3-game series. And they went 14-2 in weekend series on the season. So that showed to be true. If the Gators were to have lost yesterday, they'd be playing right now. We'd probably be in the 6th inning right now as we record. But you'd have to throw Brandon Sproat, which means then you would have Hurston Waldrop for game 1 of the College World Series final. You have Jack Caglione. And then if you get to an if necessary game, it's just like whoever's available, whoever still has a low pitch count that we can get a couple innings out of.
Yeah,
that's the situation that both Wake Forest and LSU will be in when they get to the College World Series final, as they play today. LSU specifically they have three pitchers who aren't even throwing. They haven't thrown all year. LSU has guys who, a guy in Guidry, however you say it, he was supposed to be a shortstop of the future. He threw last night against Wake Forest and has been pitching for them this year because of their injury. They just don't have a deep bullpen. So I think if you're a Florida fan, as much as it might pain you, you're probably rooting for a low-scoring extra inning game on Thursday night. But you're also looking at, hey, the likelihood of our team having to face Paul Skeens or Rhett Loader is very low. And that's a win already. You won't have a number one versus number one matchup in the College World Series final because Florida went 3-0, and these other teams now are scrapping and clawing to get to where the Gators are. So you can't say enough. And it doesn't mean you're going to win, but you can't say enough about the advantage that Florida has by going 3-0. And you'll get Brandon Sproat on Saturday, Hurston Waldrop on Sunday, and if necessary game, that's all hands on deck. But you still have Jack Caglione, who was super shaky, but also only gave up a run over his 5 innings on Wednesday night. So Florida has to feel great about the position they put themselves in.
Yeah, and just man, it's crazy how these games have come down to the wire.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the miraculous catch that they made to advance, but also the drama that we saw with Kevin O'Sullivan's mound trips, the walk off, the first one that they won. Is there one game or finish that sticks out to you, Nick? And what'd you think about Kevin O'Sullivan having some fun with his T-shirt there?
The game
When did you first see the shirt?
I got to the stadium probably 2.5 hours before the game. They had just gotten there. And I walked down the tunnel and I see it. And I'm like, well, who the heck is wearing this shirt? And Sully turns around and I start laughing. Chuck Geralman's laughing. And I was like, Coach, I need to get a picture of this. And he said, sure. Wanted to walk away. They have like all of their stats and all of their analytics for like their scouting that they're posting in the dugout. And we were kind of standing in front of it there in the dugout at Charles Schwab Field. And he like looked behind him. He's like, I don't need that to be a picture on the internet. So he walked down into a tunnel. But that was a huge blunder. This is a coach who's in his 16th year, his 8th trip to Omaha. That's a mistake that a coach making his first trip to Omaha and is nervous and gets, caught in the moment makes. So
he got picked up. Mistake of his career, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you lose that game, it is. Luckily, a 19-year-old kid, Red Panda enthusiast, Cade Fisher, picks up his coach and finishes off the game for Florida. But that was a huge blunder. The game that sticks out to me, though, one is that one because winning game 2 is almost more important than winning game 1. If you lose game 1, you're up the creek without a paddle to begin with. If you lose game 2, now you're in a position where you're going to have to win 3 more games. TCU would have had to have won 3 straight games, 2 of them being over Florida, to get to the College World Series final. That's where LSU is after losing game 2 to Wake Forest. Florida winning game 2 allowed them to now have their pitching lineup set with Jack and everyone fresh. 2 days off, everyone fresh. And that showed how beneficial it was to win game 2. But I think for me, game 1, I thought Virginia was one of the best teams in the tournament, one of the best teams in the country this year. And to get a win over them in that walk-off fashion, I think that really, gave Florida confidence. They didn't hit the ball well. Brandon Sproat was shaky in the beginning, battled himself a little bit, but then put together a really nice start. I think the game that Florida had against Virginia showed them we can play with anyone here. And then also walking off kind of gave them this push and this momentum that makes you forget that like Florida didn't hit very well. I have it like written down here somewhere. Where is it? Florida's hitting just 27 for 120. Like they're hitting barely 250, 260 in the NCAA tournament. And this is an offense that's carried them throughout the year. But then you look at their pitching staff. in the NCAA tournament. And just from the tournament, Hurston Waldrop's 3-0 with a .86 ERA. Jack Caglione's 1-0 with a .87 ERA. Cade Fisher has a sub-3 2.25. Brandon Neely's sub-3. And Ryan Slater is just a hair over 3, or just a hair under 3.5 for an ERA. Like this pitching staff is getting the job done. They're only allowing just over 2.5 runs a game since the NCAA tournament started. And Florida's offense can score 3 runs in a hurry.
Yeah, they can, and obviously it's crazy how they had that whole game the other day with TCU and just no scoring at all, and then when they needed it, man, with that 2-out hit, come up big, and that's just crazy how that play happened and how Florida was able to capitalize, and now they sit and wait as we are recording this show, and you guys are listening to it. By the time that you do, this game will already be decided between LSU and Wake Forest. And we wait now, as it's interesting how history has a chance to repeat itself. The Gators beat TCU in 2017 to advance to the College World Series, where they met LSU. Do we get another rematch of that series from 2017, or do the Gators play top-seeded Wake Forest? What are your thoughts on both of these potential matchups? Nick, do you like one better for Florida? How do you see this potentially playing out?
Yeah, I really think that it would almost feel like fate either way. Wake Forest has been the best team in the country, and I say that having watched over 60 Florida games this year. I think Wake Forest has been the best team in the country. Yes, they play in a small park, which probably is the reason why they lead the country in home runs. They haven't really shown that same kind of power in Omaha in a much bigger park, but also their pitching staff has to pitch in that same park. And Wake Forest pitching staff has been phenomenal all year. They have 3 frontline starters like the Gators do. LSU doesn't have that really. And I mentioned about them not having the depth in the bullpen. Wake Forest has guys that just come out of the bullpen throwing 95, 96, 97 miles an hour, and they can throw them 2, 3, 4, 5 guys deep in that bullpen. So if I'm looking at Wake Forest and LSU and I'm trying to find the easiest path to a championship for Florida, I think that's LSU. And that's wild to say because LSU was the number 1 team from the beginning of the season in February to 3 months into the year, before they started losing a couple games. You've got possibly the number 1 overall draft pick in Paul Skeens, the number 2 overall draft pick in Dylan Cruz, a first rounder next year in Tommy Tanks. I think Trey Morgan, their first baseman, is an incredible player. They've got a great leader in Travinsky behind the dish. Listen, there's 299 college baseball teams, and only 3 of them are still playing baseball. So there isn't an easy path. I just think where LSU's bullpen is, because they've had to play an extra game, and the fact that they'll use Paul Skeens tonight to try to get to the final, that would set up as an easier matchup for Florida. As easy as you can get when it's, the final 2 teams in the country in a best of 3.
Absolutely. And although all of our focus, I think, or should we say for fans and then folks in the media, is on this upcoming series and where the Gators sit right now, Kevin O'Sullivan and his staff have already turned their attention to next year, already recruiting for next season before this one's even finished. And they've reloaded from the transfer portal. We've seen the impact that's been able to have for the team this year. Nick, what do you make of these additions? Are already the latest one that we saw on Thursday, and just kind of what this means for the program moving forward?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Austin, the pitcher. I think the big thing for Florida when you look at their roster next year, you're going to lose Waldrop, you're going to lose Sproat, you're probably going to lose Ryan Slater, Tyler Nesbitt. You've got a bunch of guys. There's 12 guys coming in, 12 arms coming in through the transfer portal. So you've got talent coming in, but you might need to adjust some roles. I think Brandon Neely, who's been your closer all year, he's going to be a weekend guy. He's a starter. the opinion of the coaching staff, Kevin O'Sullivan in particular, is that Brandon sacrificed this season for the team by going to the bullpen. And he has earned the opportunity. And because he sacrificed for us, he will get the chance. Now, you're not just putting him in pen on Friday. He is going to have to earn it. But Brandon Neely will get the opportunity to start on weekends. Then you have Cade Fisher, Jack Caglione, Pierce Capalla, who's a 6'8" left-hander who missed his freshman year with a back surgery, missed this year with shoulder surgery. He's a 6'8" lefty who throws 98. That's a weekend starter. So when I look at getting Kelly Austin from the transfer portal, that's a guy who is going to probably be at the back end of the bullpen, and he's got really good stuff. So Florida will probably use him in that Brandon Neely closer role. Now he's not a guy that throws 95, 97 like a lot of these Florida guys, but he has a good pitch mix. He competes and he throws strikes. And I think the reason why Jack Caglione was named the starter on Sunday over Brandon Neely was, one, there's some potential there with Jack with some electric stuff, but also you saw it on Wednesday. He doesn't have his command dialed in. First year after Tommy John surgery, Jack doesn't have his command dialed in. When Brandon Neely comes in the game, he's going to throw 93 to 97, and he's going to throw strikes. And you can't afford to walk guys in the 8th and 9th inning. So that's why Brandon Neely – it wasn't that Jack was better than Brandon and they picked the better of the two to start on Sundays. It was Brandon's skill set fits better at the back end of games, and we trust him to throw strikes. So I think Austin's a guy who does that for Florida. You trust him to throw strikes. And then at catcher, Florida is, dipping back into the Coastal Carolina pool.
That's right.
I would guess that Coastal Carolina is sick of Kevin O'Sullivan, tired of him and his recruiting. This is the third player Florida's gotten from Coastal. Obviously, BT Riopel. And then you get Dale Thomas, who's played a little bit for Florida this year, a little spot starter. And then you get a catcher in Tanner Garrison. Florida, because Rene Lastres and Salvi Alvarez hit the transfer portal, only has one catcher on the roster, Luke Heyman. That's a position where a ball can bounce and break your wrist. You can get crossed up and break your thumb and be out for 6 weeks. You can't have one catcher. You can't really have two catchers. You need to have three, maybe four. So I think they'll look for a younger guy now, maybe someone from the JUCO ranks, or flipping a commitment of a high school guy. But Tanner Garrison's a guy who at Coastal hit 275 in 38 games last year, dealt with a little bit of injuries, started 22. Some power numbers, but really he is a defensive catcher. One of the best pitch framers I think we've seen in college, and a guy who is going to be a great backstop for you. Luke Heyman will be your starter. He's tearing the cover off the ball here, was the hero or one of the heroes in game one against Virginia. But he has a long way to go defensively. And I don't mean that as picking on him. I think he would tell you that as well. He's got a long way to go. There's a reason why BT Riopel has started 53 games behind the dish, and there hasn't been more of a platoon there. But Garrison has no issues behind the plate, and it's a solid pickup for Florida, who still needs to add another catcher. And then the biggest one, this is the biggest the biggest transfer portal move of the offseason is Florida landing Alabama infielder Colby Shelton. Shelton was a freshman All-American, freshman All-SEC. He hit 300, slugged 729, started 59 games, and hit 25 home runs as a freshman in the SEC. And this will be your shortstop. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Derek Fabian. Derek Fabian kind of got lost in the shuffle this year. Was asked to play a bunch of different spots in the preseason and did that. But Colby Shelton's a guy who can play third. He can play shortstop, and he can hit anywhere from 2 to 5 in your lineup. And when you start to look at this lineup with Cade Kurland, Colby Shelton, Jack Caglione, Luke Heyman, like the Florida's got some massive bats again next year. You might have an 80 home run infield next year for Florida, coming off of a year where they just broke the single season home run record for the school.
Absolutely incredible. And just to see where obviously the game is gone before taking advantage of that as well. And going to be exciting to see what happens this weekend in Omaha. Make sure that all Florida fans are tuned in to GatorsOnline.com and Nick's coverage, not only from a story aspect, but interact with him on the message board. He's got a live running thread from his weeks in Omaha. And I'm sure, obviously, if there's some national championship celebrations to be had, we'll get to see some cool videos from that as well. So make sure you guys follow along. All that, we'll be back next week, hopefully to recap a national championship for the Gators. And
if you're coming out to Omaha, I know people are looking for tickets and things like that. If Florida is playing LSU, they'll be the home team for games 1 and, if necessary, game 3. The home team sits on the third base side, or uses the third base dugout. So if you're on Ticketmaster or looking for tickets, if Florida is playing LSU, they will be in the third base dugout for the first game. If Florida is playing Wake Forest, they will be in the first base dugout. It's interesting. Florida's the number 2 overall seed in the entire country. And based on the way the NCAA does seeding, could potentially play 6 games in Omaha and be the away team in 4 of them. And listen, like, everyone's away. It's a neutral site. Everyone's sleeping in hotels, things like that. But getting the last chance to respond, getting the last at bat, makes a big difference in baseball. In my opinion, I've had some people tell me they don't think so, and they played baseball in college. I say, okay, well, I think I'd rather have the last set of at bat, rather than having to pitch in the bottom of the ninth. I'd rather be hitting.
Yeah.
Or not hitting in the bottom of the ninth because you're already winning. Florida, if you're listening, please, if you're going to win a game, maybe like 5-0, I can get some words written before the game's over. Shoot, Friday was like a Control-Alt-Delete. Now we have nothing. It's 11 p.m. Central Time. It's midnight. I'm like, people are excited, and I have nothing written. How do we get something going? So appreciate people staying up late with me as we burn the midnight oil for all of these walk-off wins and dramatic finishes.
Yep, and they've definitely been tuning into, because our numbers at Gators Online support that. They've been checking out the coverage, so make sure you guys are tuned in as well. Before we switch gears, want to give a shout out to My Perfect Franchise. If you are ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, looking for a side hustle while working your current job, or wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner, and helps people find franchises to fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at myperfectfranchise.net, or calling or texting him at 404 973 9901. That's 404 973 9901. And although all attention, I think, these past couple weeks have been on Florida baseball, Todd Golden has been in the news. Recently, he kind of wrapped up his transfer class. We talked about it on our last episode with the addition of Zion Pullen. He also added another guard from San Francisco, and then who will be a freshman from Lithuania to complete his 2023-2024 roster. But I had an opportunity to visit with Todd last week in his office and talk about his transfer class, talk about his revamped roster, and just how he feels about his program and where he and his staff stand kind of heading into year 2. And it was interesting, Nick, because at the time that I visited with him, Billy Napier and his staff had not gone on this huge recruiting run that we'll get into. So there was a lot of conversation out there about Florida football recruiting, and I had asked Todd about the success that he had on the trail from a basketball recruiting standpoint, and dealing with the pressure and expectations at Florida, and kind of what he learned about that in year 1. And he kind of told me after we got done talking, like, it's not really that all that bad for him at Florida. There are times when the fans, maybe get upset about a result, and you maybe you should stay away from social media. But he said, "Hey, man, Florida fans have been great and supportive, and really pales into comparison to some of the stuff that he sees that Billy has to go through on a weekly basis." But Todd just,
not this week, not this week in football,
yeah.
but a lot of weeks, but not this week.
Yeah, no. As soon as he made that comment to me, they went on a tear. So I'm sure Todd was really happy to see that because him and Billy are pretty tight. But you know, in talking with Todd, he definitely is a guy that is very confident about where his roster and his program stands. You know, last year's team, right? He had like a month to attack the transfer portal and try and land guys that were left. And that's really not enough time to really go out there and scout and have a product that you can sell. They only added 5 players to the roster for last season, and that's including transfers and the high school guys that they signed. Obviously, Riley Kugel was a big one. But this year's team, all 13 scholarship players, are all guys that Golden and his staff added and recruited. And I think that could potentially make a big difference because now they are working with talent that they have specifically recruited for their system. And it's interesting, Nick, like as we know, in football, when you're trying to rebuild a program and revamp a roster, it takes multiple recruiting classes. You got 85 scholarship players, 100 plus on the team. You don't just do it in 1 year. Well, in basketball, you can. You only got 13 scholarship players, and when you add 9 guys to the roster, you can revamp it. And when you look at what they've done, and we'll get more into the transfer class, but just obviously getting Kugel back, which I know you've talked about, but being able to go get guys from the high school ranks and then kill it from the portal has put Florida in the conversation to really kind of change the trajectory of their program after missing the tournament the last 2 years.
It's portal god Todd, like you said. The transfer portal has changed every sport. You're seeing that now. Florida's even getting into it, and Florida baseball was a recruiting juggernaut for the high school level. They would lose more guys they wanted to the major league draft than to their rivals, Miami or Florida State. And now they're getting into the portal. I think someone messed up and gave Kevin O'Sullivan the password to the transfer portal. Football, you need to do it, but I think Billy sees it more as supplemental. And Billy sees the first transfer portal, that winter transfer portal, as much more beneficial with more talent than he does the spring portal, especially with their process, which is not quick. It's not speed dating. In the spring, speed dating. That's like we're on Tinder swiping right just indiscriminately in the spring. And you can only get so many pieces. In basketball, like you just said, and like Todd Golden just did, you can have a brand new basketball team every single year. Every single year, you can have I didn't like those guys. Hey, you all need to leave. We're going to get 9 more guys in the portal, and we're going to have a brand new team. So basketball, more so than any of the other major sports, the transfer portal will shape every team every year. And I'm excited to see what Todd Golden will put together and put on the court in year 2, because he absolutely has handpicked this roster.
Yeah, he has. And, it was interesting. One dynamic that I didn't really consider, is just the transition that he had at Florida compared to San Francisco. Because, when he became the head coach there, he had been an assistant coach at the program for 3 years. So he, as he said to me, my last year one, I didn't move. I just got promoted. So he had 12 guys in the program that he knew. He basically kept the staff, and it was just a lot of retention. Where as he comes to Florida, and it's a complete reboot, and as he said, there were some challenges that he didn't expect, and some things that he kind of had to navigate through. And as you know, Nick, it's one thing to try and if you have to rebuild a program, and that's the reality of where it is. it's another thing when you're having to do that at a program that expects to be elite. And even though it's had some down years, the fans still want immediate results right away. And, I think that there was a lot of lessons learned and knowledge gained for Golden and his staff in year one. And, as he said to me, they knew at some point during the year, like, hey, we're going to have a lot of roster turnover. We're just going to have to make the best out of this season and then go and attack the portal and really get better at our deficiencies. And the way that they've been able to do that, obviously, with the bigs that they've added to replace Colin Castleton and then the guys that you get at the guard spots, with Walter Clayton, Zion Pullen. I mean, those are probably those guys are going to be in a starting rotation with Kugel and Richard, and that's a good nucleus that you have right there, and it'll probably be a front court by committee with some of their bigs and having to replace Colin Castleton. And now we wait to see what happens with Colin. The NBA draft is on Thursday night. There's some talk about him potentially sneaking into the second round. But Todd said that he thinks that this is a guy that could potentially play 10 to 15 years in the league if he gets in the right situation and with the right team. If he can get drafted, that's certainly going to be a feather in Todd's cap from a recruiting aspect. I definitely think that coming into next year, in the next draft for 2024, that Riley Kugel has a chance to go pretty high, and that'll be big. Obviously, to get him back as a sophomore, that was the biggest recruit that he had, right, Nick?
In my opinion, in my humble, knowledgeable basketball opinion, yes.
Yeah, no, it's and look, Riley tested those waters. He kind of had a Bradley Beal-ish type finish to his freshman year where his stock just kind of skyrocketed because of the way that he played down the stretch in SEC play. But now you get him back, you get Will Richard back, you get to pair those guys with two dynamic guards and two of the best transfers in the country in Zion Pullen and Clayton. I'm excited to watch what that's going to look like. And, and like you said, hand-picked pieces that he and his staff have kind of brought to the system. It was clear that they just had personnel last year that they were working with that kind of round, square peg, round hole type of situation. And then when you also know that guys aren't completely bought in or already looking to transfer, it's, it is what it is. The fact that they were able to get a win over Tennessee, that was certainly something that they can kind of build on. So we got to meet with Todd on Thursday for the first time. He met with the reporters, kind of addressed some of the transfers, but also said, hey, there's no spots guaranteed in terms of the starting lineup. We got a bunch of competition to be had in summer workouts and as we get ready for the season. And one of the reporters goes, Riley Kugel, he'll start. And Todd was like, oh, we'll see. He's got to earn it. And, he was a little tongue in cheek there, but I like the answer there. And I'm excited to see what this brings. But obviously, Nick, between him in the portal and on the trail, Billy, and then what we got Kevin O'Sullivan doing, like, the big three, they got it rolling right now in recruiting.
Yeah, this is Florida, and listen, obviously there's much more that goes into recruiting and getting a commitment. But this football staff, they really understand the news cycle. You get some Austin Simmons bad news, and just like that, a wave, an absolute tsunami of commitments, not from like just guys. You're getting dudes in the class, guys that pushed Florida up into our on-3 consensus to have the number 2 class in the entire country. Billy saw some bad news, maybe got on the message board, Zach, read some haters, drank all that up and said, all right, let's turn it on. And Florida's recruiting class, I think, is setting up, and it'll be interesting to see how they finish. I think Florida, when you look at recruiting, right now, the Gators are just behind Georgia. And if you look at the average rating, I think we need to do that because we were pointing out last year, Florida in the average rating is the fourth best class in the country behind Bama, Ohio State, and Georgia. But with 16 commitments, you've got most of your class done. I think 25 is definitely a number to hit, which gives you 9 more. And then looking at Florida's roster, Florida has guys who are former walk-ons that will be on scholarship this year. Adam, I think Mahalik is still on scholarship. I think Khalil Jackson is still on scholarship. So they're technically under the 85 for this year. You're not beholden to 25 signees anymore. Florida could get 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 commits. Now, those are going to be guys that Florida really wants, and that might also end up being guys that they have in the transfer portal. I'm just trying to point out that Florida has 16, but they will have room for a bigger class, especially when you include the transfer portal after the season in December.
Yeah, and you always expect that there's going to be attrition, and that's something that happens. But yeah, number 2 class in the country right now for 2024. Todd Golden is off to a good start with his 24 class with the commitment of Bowl, and from the transfer front, they finished with the number 5 class in the on-3 team rankings for transfers, and on the data and analytics website, evanmaya.com, they actually ranked Florida with the number 1 transfer class. So portal guy Todd getting busy, Maybach Billy getting busy, and Kevin O'Sullivan is getting in on the action as well. So you love to see it, as Gator Nation would say. Before we wrap up the show, want to give a shout out to another one of our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Prairie Dental Center. The doctor is a UF grad who's practiced in Gainesville for 3 decades and has developed a deep understanding of how to diagnose and treat various dental problems, along with advanced skills and knowledge to provide more effective and efficient care to his patients. If you're having dental concerns or just need a cleaning, Prairie Dental Center offers a wide range of personalized care options to meet your individual needs. Give their office a call at 352-373-3431. Tell them Gators Online sent you, and your new patient exam will be free. And we've already touched on Florida football recruiting. That will continue this Friday as Friday Night Lights takes place in the Swamp. This is the first time that it's taken place in June, I believe. It's always been a late July event, and the Gators are obviously riding a lot of recruiting momentum into this event. They had the 7 commitments in 3 days, 9 commitments over a week span, and have now catapulted to number 2 in the recruiting rankings. I don't know how many commits they'll get out of this event. DJ Lagway is expected to attend, is expected to throw, so that should create some fireworks. But Nick, this event is not what it used to be, and it really has nothing to do with Florida. When this was a big deal and when this was kind of the summer event of recruiting, this was before the early signing period. This was before recruits were taking official visits in June, and that was allowed. It used to only be in the fall. So there was a lot more value in this event. Now a lot of these guys are committed or have already wrapped up their recruitments before you get to the end of July, which is why this event even got moved up a month this year. I don't even know how much longer we're going to see Friday Night Lights, to be honest with you.
Zachary?
Just a hunch? I'm just trying to warn fans now. And the reason why is they get a lot more bang for their buck with the 7-on-7 camps and the individual day camps. And honestly, because of the recruiting calendar changing around, camps and 7-on-7s and Friday Night Lights events like this, they're more for the class coming up. If you're a 24 kid trying to show up in June and get an offer from Florida, tough luck. Like, they already got 16 commits. This class is pretty much wrapped up. So, and because there is a lot more focus on underclassmen, and you're trying to build your board for future cycles. You're just not going to get a lot of name grabbing attendees at these events. So it's not really worth trying to build up this big event anymore. So, but we at least have it for one more summer, Nick.
It was exclusive. It was that secret bar that changed its number. You had to know somebody who knew somebody who was a member that could sneak you into it. And as it grew in popularity because of the names that you got. I remember being on message boards thinking, how does who's this Ronald Powell guy, and how does a senior excuse me, and how does a junior in high school look like this? And seeing the guys that were showing up to Friday Night Lights, and obviously then it becomes huge, and now everyone wants to go to it. And it's turned into before that, it turned into okay, all of the best guys in the country are coming and competing against each other. To, okay, well, all of the best guys in the country that Florida might have a chance with are coming to stand in shorts on the sideline and watch other people compete. And now it's like there's 900 kids, maybe 15 that Florida likes. None of them competed. Maybe one of them did, and he's playing against a kid who's, no offense to that kid, not going to be a Division I football player or not going to be an SC caliber football player. Just the quality of Friday Night Lights, I think, from what it began and what it was supposed to be, has just been watered down over the years. And it's no fault of Florida's. It's just It became super popular, and everyone wanted to be a part of it. And NCAA rules say you can't hold exclusive camps. So you have to, even if it's in the tiniest of small print, on the bottom of the poster, be like, anyone can come for $50. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people have $50 and they want to be at that camp because it's a chance for them to get noticed. So it just hasn't been what it was. And I think people will be upset if the Friday Night Lights doesn't continue, but they're upset because they remember what it used to be. And it hasn't been that in quite some time.
Because recruiting is not what it used to be, and the calendar is not what it used to be, and it's not worth the staff. It's not worth it for the staff to hold this big event and all the work and time that it takes to throw it and pull it off, to have 900 kids show up and there only be like 15 that you're really, really scouting. It's better to have a bunch of one-day camps, and now you got 3 to 4 or 5 guys that show up on each day, but you're only dealing with like 100 campers, 50 campers. That's a lot more easy to manage and scout and see what you got on the field. So the logistics of it, I think, is important. But like you said, no fault of Florida's. I think that's important to point out, but also important to, hey, for Florida fans and the ones that have been following this since the days that you and I started doing this, Nick, this might be your last chance to come out this Friday. So get out there and do it if you feel like watching DJ Lagway throw in the swamp, because I don't know when we'll have another Friday Night Lights or if we will again. So
PJ DJ back in the air, back in the swamp.
Well, as we look at keys to Florida's success in the 2024 cycle, one of them is obviously DJ Lagway, and having a 5-star quarterback committed, and not only him being part of the class and on board, but actively recruiting others to join it, and taking the PJ to Gainesville whenever he feels like it, and making sure that he's here for big events like Friday Night Lights. But a lot of other things have factored into it, Nick. I've had a bunch of people on radio shows and podcast interviews that I've done since Florida's recruiting stretch that they just had, which is the best that they've ever had in school history outside of signing day, for 7 commits in 3 days. It's the best that they've ever had. From your standpoint, I know you've been knees deep in baseball coverage in Omaha, but
eyeballs.
You have a pulse and I think a perspective on where this program is at and how recruiting has changed, how NIL has factored into things, and then obviously how Billy and his staff work. What do you think have been some of the keys to the success that they've had, and going from last summer where they landed 4 guys in 1 week twice in July, and we thought that was like really impressive, to now they're landing 4 guys in one day, and they've just taken it to another level.
It's interesting. I don't really know where momentum can come from in the recruiting cycle, and Florida has the momentum right now. I'm sure people are angry because it's probably been 48 hours since a commitment. They've lost the momentum, Zach. They lost it. But it's interesting. Where does momentum come from? Does it come from a visit? Does it come from in Georgia's case, the momentum comes from the product on the field. They're back-to-back national champions. Kids want to go there. I think something that I've spoken with Billy Napier about, something I heard DJ Lagway tell Keith Niebuhr when he interviewed him up in Nashville was this age group, they don't know Florida like you and I know Florida. You and I were in college when Tebow was here, when the basketball team was winning. And make no mistake about it, basketball winning helped football recruiting.
Yeah.
And football winning helped basketball recruiting. I don't know that any of the football players care that Florida's playing for a baseball national championship, but football and basketball winning when Florida was there helped recruiting. These kids were 1 and 2 years old when those teams were winning championships. I don't even think they give out. I do think they give out the trophy that Florida has, in the Hawkins Center, not the Hawkins Center, the Hebner football complex. But that's not the trophy that these kids know. Mm-hmm. So what is that old thing? That's a national championship. No, it isn't. Florida is battling a perception that the program is just mediocre because that's what they've been for the most of these kids' lives that they're trying to get commitments from. So when you say names like Brandon Spikes and Percy Harvin and Tim Tebow, these guys might know Tim Tebow more for being on SEC Network than they do for playing football and being a Heisman winner. Maybe some of them. It sounds crazy to people like us and to people older than us that lived through it.
I mean, I heard Shannon Sharp said that, and I mean, he's a guy's a Pro Bowl Hall of Fame tight end, and he's like, I got people that recognize me for the show that I do on TV and not my playing career.
Yeah, and that's so for us and for Gator fans, for people our age, it's Florida is a dominant power. They remembered Spurrier in the 90s and winning all those SEC championships, winning a national championship. They remember Urban Meyer. These guys know Urban Meyer as Ohio State's coach.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if he's anything, he's that, or he's that guy on Fox.
Yeah, and these guys are young to the point where Urban wasn't even recruiting them when he was a coach. So that's the age group we're talking about. So you're not using any of Florida's real history of putting guys, in national championships, of getting rings. These guys don't know that. So Florida has to build an experience when they're on campus. They have to play out with their NIL and say, hey, look, when you're on your official visit with us, when you're on your unofficial visit with us, and you're interacting with the players, hey, what's Florida victorious? What's the NIL like here? And then those guys on the team can tell you. So they're building the infrastructure, I think, and that's where Florida is. They can't sell winning. They were 6-7 last year. They haven't won the SEC since since Tebow was here.
Yep,
you've won just a couple. You won a couple SEC East titles with Dan and Jim McElwain, and got your teeth kicked in Atlanta. So you're selling a vision at Florida, and I think that's what Billy Napier and his staff have been saying. Hey, be patient, because it takes time to build the infrastructure to be able to sell the vision.
Yeah. And I think that they know how to sell Florida now better than they ever have, right? So many of them on the staff had to learn what are all the great things about you have to sell to recruits. What are the punchlines, right? What are the go-tos? Mike Peterson knew what those were. Vernell Brown, when he was on staff, could have told that to some recruits, but most people on the staff didn't. And I think that they know their product now. I think the NIL component cannot be ignored. That was always something that held Florida back in the last cycle, to be frank. And they would do everything right in terms of building the relationship, getting the guys on campus, doing everything to be right there as a finalist. And then when the NIL conversation came up, some other school would swoop in and kind of take advantage of that. I don't think that that's happening as much now. with the structure that they have with Florida Victorious. So that's not holding Florida back. And if anything, there's probably some instances where it's helping them because it is, they've dotted their I's and crossed their T's. So we will continue to monitor how things play out this month. The staff will have a chance to take a break after Friday Night Lights. There will be some decisions that get made in July. So the commitments won't stop coming, but things will slow down in terms of guys coming to campus. But still one more event that we're going to monitor before the cookout in late July. So between Friday Night Lights and Omaha this weekend for the College World Series final, a lot for Florida fans to be tuned into at GatorsOnline.com. So make sure that you guys are following along for all of Nick's coverage on the site, on the message board, on Twitter, on YouTube. We'll be bringing it all to you guys, and we'll be back next week to recap how that series went and how Friday Night Lights went down. For Nick Del Torre, I'm Zach Albaverdi.